Welcome to Rooted, Stories of Community-Driven Change, a special podcast partnership between Island Girls Rock and the Clara Lionel Foundation. We are sitting down with women leaders across the US South and the Caribbean who are leading organizations rooted in culture, community, and purpose. These are the voices reshaping local power structures, uplifting traditions, and proving that the most powerful innovations emerge from deep community roots. Caribbean women and girls are living on the front lines of the climate crisis. And today's guest has built her life's work around making sure their voices actually lead the response. Jhannel Tomlinson is a scholar activist, co-founder of GirlsCARE JA, Jamaica, and a passionate advocate for climate justice that is rooted in community, mentorship, and care. In this conversation, we talk about GirlsCARE JA's 5-year journey, what women-led climate action really looks like on the ground, and the role that partners like the Clara Lionel Foundation have played in sustaining their work. This one is a beautiful, intricate conversation. Let's get into it. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Clara Lionel Foundation and Island Girls Rock limited edition podcast series. We're so happy today to be in conversation with Jhannel Tomlinson, and we'll be speaking about the work of GirlsCARE JA, the organization's 5-year journey, their mentorship-centered approach to climate justice, and how support from partners like CLF has helped them to strengthen and sustain this work, particularly in moments of crisis and response. So, Jhannel, to start, there's a question that we always ask the people that we're in conversation with. What island are you repping today?
Thank you so much for having me, first of all. And I'd like to say that I'm repping the beautiful, beautiful island of Jamaica.
Jamaica. Awesome. I would love for you to tell us a little bit about yourself and your role as co-founder of GirlsCARE JA. What inspired you to start the organization?
Sure, I'd be happy to share about Girls Care and my role and, the advent of, Girls Care into the space. So first off, I'm Jhannel Tomlinson-Evans, one of the co-founders of Girls Care. And working alongside the founder, Aisha Constable, I would say that, my role has evolved over time. But at
Mm-hmm.
the heart of it, I would say that it's predominantly about staying deeply grounded in communities and their realities. So that means everything from helping to co-design programs with women and girls, navigating policy spaces, donor relationships, partnerships, and again, kind of navigating that space between grassroots needs and institutional systems. So I play, a little bit of all those different roles. Aisha and I were predominantly the main members of the team for a very long time. And
Right.
so we were doing a lot of the work, but since then we have been able to, acquire some funding where we're now able to bring on additional support. And so the
Mm-hmm.
roles have, been still oversight, still management, still monitoring, but also creating space for other young women who came up through the program to also contribute to some of the heavy operational type of activities. And
Mm-hmm.
so Girls Care was inspired by, what we kept witnessing within the climate space. We'd be at events and recognize that, the realities of women and girls, despite how important they were being shared by persons who were not necessarily the ones experiencing a lot of
Right.
challenges. We recognized again that, after these different climate shocks and slow onset crises, the women and the girls were always the ones responding. They were caring for
Mm-hmm.
siblings, they were supporting livelihoods, they were the ones who were, first responders in their communities, but were rarely at the decision making table. And so, again, their realities, their needs, all the different challenges were being articulated on their behalf by others.
By
So
others.
we
Right.
wanted to create that space for, giving them a voice,
Mm-hmm.
creating Girls Care as a space for women by women with
Mm,
women, creating space for dialogue, for sharing of experiences, for young women
mm,
to be able to learn from others who have been in the space for some time. The idea of mentorship, the idea of care, the idea of community, all of those were central to Girls Care and us wanting to create
mm,
space, and
mm.
of course ensuring that we pass on the baton, because at some point we would not necessarily be the ones occupying
Yes,
some of the spaces, and so ensuring
yes.
that these women get to tell their own stories through their own voices, through ways that they consider important to them, was also important. And so
Right.
the values of care, of equity, of leadership, of accountability helped to shape Girls Care's direction.
Mm,
And we have been able to prioritize listening, co-creation, and trust within the different initiatives, within the different partnerships, and with the young women who we engage with and who we
yes.
end up being in community and in fellowship with over time. So I
Mm.
will pause there so
I
that we
mean,
can have space for the other questions.
no, I appreciate it. I appreciate it. And you have shared quite a lot of information. So, what I want to do for our listeners is perhaps break that down. And I
Mhm.
want to ask you, because you said something that really sparked um, another question, right? And it's something that I have witnessed, it's something that I've experienced as a girl and now a woman. You mentioned that typically in times of crisis, girls and women are the first responders.
Mhm.
Why do you feel that is?
So I think in the Caribbean and in so many other spaces, women are the ones in their households. So they're the caregivers, they're the
Hmm.
nurturers, they're the ones who look out for the other family members, irrespective of whatever other responsibilities they have.
Hmm.
It's the idea that it's the woman's responsibility to ensure that the household is taken care of. So, children, chores, prioritizing, how things are done. I think women have always been assigned that role, and then that has built over into the community as well. So when there are persons who are ill, who are shut in for whatever reason, when there are small children who need support, you'll always see that nurturing instinct, that characteristic coming out. And I think it's something that innately we have as women, and so it comes out in
Mm.
the spaces. And so I think that yes, the men will show up to do the, let's call it, heavy lifting. So if
Right,
there's
right.
rubble to be cleared, if there's a vehicle to be removed from somewhere, if there is the kind of more heavy lifting, the infrastructural repairs and that type of stuff. But I think the kind of softer skills, the care, the lending of support, ensuring that persons, have the resources that they need to be able to bounce back. I think that's something that's innate and intrinsic to women, that
Mm.
has built over, I think, from the household into the community, and continues to show up not just, in Jamaica or in Nevis or in other Caribbean countries, but I think in so
Hmm.
many areas across the world we see it happening. So I
Right,
think it might
right.
be just that innate need to care and show up for others even when you need support yourself.
Right. And I actually want to put a pin in that, the need to show up for yourself, because I really want to explore that aspect of the work that Girls Care does. I want to explore the self care and the caring of the team and how you guys pour into yourselves, the way
Mm-hmm.
that you pour into your communities. But before we get there, something that you mentioned as well was that, you know, due to the support of others and partnerships with others, you're able to now be more expansive in terms of the team itself. And I think one of those arms of support, not that I think, I know that one of the arms of that type of support has come from the Clara Lionel Foundation, which of course invests in women led, community rooted work. How has that partnership shaped the organization, both in practical ways and in how you see your long term vision coming to life?
Sure. So support from CLF, the Clara Lionel Foundation, I would say has been transformative for our work. They have provided flexible funding that has allowed us to respond to more of some of the internal operational sorts of activities. So we
Yes.
did receive the core funding, and you know how difficult it is to get core funds
Oh,
from
I
those.
do.
Oftentimes they're tied to, specific thematic areas, or
Yes.
tied to a specific project, or an initiative. But CLF has supported us to be able to do, the things that we need to go by on a daily basis. So whether
Hmm.
it's capacity building, whether it's investing in different activities that are considered important to prevent burnout within the team, whether it's support for an in-country meetup, support to be able to provide honorariums for our newer members that we've been able to bring on. And so the core funds, I
Yes.
would say, have been quite critical in ensuring that we're able to do the day-to-day activities. But of course, as well, the project related funds are also just as important. So those funds have been able to support us to provide psychosocial care, for example, to different
Mm.
communities. We've been able to continue some aspects of our mentorship program. More recently, with the passage of Hurricane Beryl, we received some funds from CLF as well, which have continued to provide support to the affected communities on the ground.
Yes.
So
Yes.
of course, the support is twofold. It's both internal and external. And so we have seen where, the partnerships, the funds that we've received have been quite useful. And I guess it's also an indication from Cara Lionel that, your way of working is valid. The work
Yes.
that we have done and continue to do, they consider it important. They consider it
Hmm.
as, in alignment with their core values and with their overall way of working. And so we're
Hmm.
also grateful, and it's an indication that I guess we're doing something right. And the fact
Hmm.
that we've been able to, again, receive funds both for core and external purposes, I guess,
Hmm.
reiterate that, Girls Care continues to show up on their radar, continues to show up in a way that
Yes.
they consider to be useful to the community. And of course, beyond the resources, I just like to say that their trust has been powerful. And
Mm.
as a woman led Caribbean organization, being trusted to lead has strengthened, I would say, our long term vision. So, definitely thank you to CLF
Yes.
for that trust, for that support, and for that continued even capacity building. Because even outside of the funds, we had joined the in person gathering that they had for grantee partners. And
And when
so,
was that, Jhannel? When did that take
that
place?
was in the latter part of last year. I'm trying to
Hmm.
remember when exactly, but it may have been. It was the
That's
latter
okay.
part of last year for
We
sure.
can
But yeah,
find, yeah, the last quarter, right?
yeah. But we
Right.
were able to join some of the other grantees from Jamaica across the other territories, and so we're really grateful for that opportunity, for that in-person gathering, and just hearing from different
Mm.
partners, and again, being in community with so many other groups that are doing work
Right.
that may not necessarily be similar, but are geared
Hmm.
towards the kind of
Mm.
goals of empowerment and building communities and relationships.
Janelle, you've mentioned three things there in that information that you've shared with us that I think are very important,
Mm-hmm.
especially as you said, we're women led organizations, we're based and rooted in the Caribbean, our work
Yeah.
is for the Caribbean. And three things that you mentioned were in terms of CLF and their support, it was for project work, very
Mm-hmm.
project specific work, and it was also for operational,
Yeah.
everyday overheads. And
Mm-hmm.
then again, they brought all of the grantees together so you could
Yes.
meet one another and, develop an ecosystem even there. Those are three integral movements for any type of nonprofit, but especially for us based in the Caribbean, where access to these type of initiatives and resources is very limited. And often when we are asked to submit applications, they're for restricted funds. So they are for something very specific and it has to tick this box and that box, and the lack of trust
Yeah.
that we are going to do what we said we're going to do is so potently obvious that I don't know about you guys, but for me, sometimes it even puts me off applying for the
Yeah.
funding or the grant, right? And so it sounds to me that CLF, they have the right formula. Yeah, that
So
there is a true sense of respect for the work that is being done and trust, which is so important. So for me, my question is, how did you feel when when it was confirmed that you would be getting this funding, this grant, and this support from CLF?
So interestingly, I remember the first time when so Aisha had reached out, she was like, "Oh, Jhannel, we got an email from Caroline L. Fund, which is the one that's been run by Rihanna and her team out of Barbados." We were very skeptical. We thought it was a scam, to be honest.
Right, of course.
But we're like,
And I can
how did we
understand
even end
why.
up on their radar in the first place? No, I don't
Right.
think so. But then I think there was a follow-up email from Crystal, and then we eventually
Mhm.
had a call, and she walked us through what exactly was happening. This was a couple because this is our third. This is actually our third. So the Hurricane Melissa support is actually the third
Right.
grant type of support that we've received. So initially it was a grant for, I think it might have been, initially it was core, and then the second one was a 3-year continued support for, and then we would decide whether it would be a mix between core and external, which we did, and then with the recent passage of Hurricane Melissa, that would have been the third set
Okay.
of funds we got from CLF. And so the initial engagement, which was a few years ago, I'd say probably 2 or 3 years ago, when we got that email, we're like, nope, you're not gonna catch us, not at all.
We're not even going to
Not with the
respond.
scam. And then we got another email, and then
Hmm.
we realized, okay, I don't think a scammer would be this persistent.
Right.
And so we had the conversation. She shared with us all that was happening, and then we were asked to submit, some documents and stuff, just to prove, that the organization was around for as long as we said we were, and
Hmm.
that kind of method of showing legitimacy.
Of
And
course.
then I think maybe a few months later, we got an email to say, "Hey, you've been selected to be a part of the next round of our grantee partners." We were ecstatic because we were like, wow, what did we do to end
Oh
up
my
here?
God.
So
What
it
you
was
mean?
really
Done the
amazing.
work. What you mean, Jhannel? Come
So it
on.
was amazing. It was
Right.
amazing to record. And then when we saw the full list of, other persons, we were like, okay, to be on this list with some of these other organizations and
Mm.
entities that we look up to, that we see their work as being transformational and also being a part of this, I think it was very not only heartwarming for us, but it also showed that again, we're doing something right, and that the
Hmm.
work um requires the level of effort and the level of, I
Yes.
would say, support that we have been receiving. And so yeah, it was an interesting opportunity for us, and I would
Hmm.
say that it has also provided us with the kind of capacity. It has given us the opportunity to also be in connection with other donors, just because we were able to, amplify our work. We were able
Yes.
to
Yes.
do additional work, and so the visibility increased, and all these other
Wonderful.
things. And so yeah, I would say that that was a real eye opener for us. And again, it kind of
Yes.
validated the need to continue the work.
Yes, and your work is so impactful, Jhannel.
Yeah.
I've known about Girls Care JA, I think for maybe 3 years,
Yeah.
and I can't remember how we found you, but we did.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we immediately started to follow your work because so much of what you do also aligns with Island Girls Rock. It's like, oh my
Mhm.
gosh, look, people out there
I-
doing the same thing. It was great. No,
yes.
it's a good feeling to know that there are other organizations, that we're not crazy, that, our vision is actually, it's valid. Like there are
Yeah.
other women-led organizations that are thinking of the same things and are thinking in the same way that we do as well. And for me, there is beauty and power in that alone. And so, you said something about being able to be more visible, which
Yeah.
is also very impactful, so that
Is it-
people can find you. And when
Yeah.
they find you, they can support, or you guys can collaborate. So it's
Mm-hmm.
a beautiful thing to see that this is being made possible by another island girl, right?
Agreed.
That's pretty
Agreed.
awesome. That's pretty awesome. And one of the many things that I love about Girls Care JA is mentorship, right?
Yes.
Mentorship is such a central part of what you do.
Mm-hmm.
Can you share why this approach is so meaningful to you and how you feel it helps young women grow as leaders, especially in climate action and resilience across the Caribbean?
Sure. So I am a product of mentorship myself.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember being in undergrad and having a mentor to kind of provide that guidance and to steer you in the right direction. I think helped me to be able to make better decisions, kind of navigating the university space. And then from there, getting into the advocacy space, Aisha, again, who is the founder of Girls Care, was my mentor. So she
Oh,
was the one.
wow.
Yes. So she was the one who, because we were at university during the same time, and she
Mm-hmm.
was the one who she was like, she recognizes this gap in the space, and we need young women, empowered young women at least, to be able to create space for other young women. And so when she pitched the idea of Girls Care, I was very happy to be a part of it, very happy to, collaborate and provide that kind of support initially, and then eventually we got into the thick of it. And so I, again, having benefited from mentorship, recognized the importance of it. And again, we come across so many young women who, even outside of the climate space, who have all these
Mm-hmm.
ideas, who have that spark, who are passionate, but just don't have a clue about the first step, the what, the why, the where, the how, the when. And so for
Yes.
us, being able to pair young women with, I'd say, more mature women who've been at it for some time, it not only creates the space for, learning and sharing, but also I think the learning goes to both ways. So it's not only
Yes.
about the mentee being the one learning, but the mentor, and all our mentors have shared that, again, the kind of mentorship arrangement has helped them to also understand the perspectives of, these young women coming up in the space who may not necessarily, again, have all the information, and being able to pivot, or being able to look to them for support. And that goes both ways. And so for us, particularly within the climate space,
Hmm.
where when you're young, you're often seen as, oh, you have all these ideas, but you don't have the experience. Oh, you're young, and we understand that you might have, gone to university and studied this. But again, we've been doing this for so much, for so long. And so for us, you lack the experience needed to be able to speak to this. Through mentorship, a lot of them have been able to understand things a little bit better. They have been able to
Yes.
ground themselves in the space a little bit better, again, through recommendations of their mentors. They've been put on to persons who can also support them in their different journeys. I mean, we've been able to support women in construction, who
Mm.
have this idea of, smart buildings and smart building codes and all these different things, and have been able to connect them with persons within the construction space as well, who are into green buildings and green
Yes.
construction, to kind of understand a little bit more what that is like. We've seen young women who are more creatives, being able to connect with other more mature, again, persons who are poets, who are
Mm.
singers, who are artists, again, to just understand the space and understand the field. And so for us, it's one thing to, want to get into this space, and you've done a lot of the theoretical training. So you've gone to university, you've gotten the degree, you know exactly the theory that's linked to the work, but the
Right, right.
practicality of it, how to apply it in real life, some of the do's and don'ts, some of the things to look out for. Again, those are the things that I think come with mentorship, and that we have been able to provide through the space over the past couple of years, just by connecting these women with other women who have, done it, been there and done that, and just help them to navigate the space. Also, one of the things to our mentorship program that we have done is we've brought in persons who we don't necessarily call them speakers or presenters, we call them
Mm-hmm.
storytellers. And they
Yes.
and they
Yes.
share, yes, their stories. So a young woman from Jamaica will be able to hear from one of our colleagues in the Wapichan women's movement in Guyana, for example,
Mm-hmm.
who will be able to speak to her experience as an Indigenous woman working with other young women in the space, sharing the experiences, sharing the challenges, sharing the opportunities. We've connected with our colleagues in Kenya, we've connected with our colleagues in other Caribbean countries, from Fiji, again, tapping into our networks so that our storytellers can also share their experiences. So while they aren't necessarily mentors themselves, they have a story to tell, they have experiences to share, they have thoughts and ideas that they'd want to, pass on to this younger generation of women. And
Yes,
so through the
yes.
mentorship, we've also been able to do that. And then we have the kind of more formalized aspect of it where we ask the mentors and mentors to kind of sit and commit to a few things that they want to achieve out of the program. So there's a contract of sorts, and we ask them to come up with at least three objectives that they want to achieve. So either they want to ensure that by the end of the program, they would have maybe done a podcast with Island
Okay.
Girls Rock, for
Hey,
example.
hey, we can help with
They would have done that.
that.
Or they'd want to do a blog post and we would find
Mm,
a host for it. They'd
mhm,
want to probably do an online certificate in something around sustainability. So the mentors and mentees have free range to decide on what it is that they want to do.
mm,
And then there's a collective sort of agreement on what the mentor will do, what the mentee will do, and then
mhm.
timelines are fixed to each other. That so it's not just the program in itself where they have the weekly speakers and then they get to reflect and then they get to discuss, and then they have the kind of hands-on activities that they do, but also the
Right.
mentors and mentees are expected to have this kind of, let's call it a roadmap that they stick to
Yes.
and
Yes.
say that by the end, by this timeline, we want to have achieved this and make sure that we've stuck to it. So those are just, I
Mm,
would say, some of the things, and particularly again within the climate space where things oftentimes are technical, and again you have to have, I would say, the knowledge and the experience to kind of navigate the space. Having a mentor who can support that, I think, makes it a bit easier
mhm,
for the young women, especially the ones who want to get into advocacy, who want to get into
mm.
that kind of work, to kind of help them as well to mobilize the resources, tap into different networks to be able to do the work on the ground in their communities. So I would
Right.
also say that's another key thing that we've benefited from through the program.
Through the program. And everything that you've said, Janelle, sounds so intentional, which is something that I have loved about just witnessing, from social media and all the information that you share, that the program itself seems very intentional. And one of the things I feel that we have alignment on is the emphasis on intergenerational learning. What have you seen happen when mentors and mentees build these connections, both for the young women involved and for the wider movement?
Sure. Thanks for that question. And as you rightly said, it's something that's very, I would say, important to the work that we continue to do. Um, I think I had mentioned before in the interview that I'm also a product of mentorship myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would have seen the importance of having a more, mature, let's say mature, seasoned
Yes.
um,
I like
woman
seasoned.
who would have been, involved in the space, the ins
Mm-hmm.
and the outs, have, all the experience with, how these different spaces work, particularly when we think about advocacy, when we think about gender justice, when we think about grassroots organizing. And so I think, peering mentors and mentees, particularly ones who are more mature and less mature, it creates
Mm-hmm.
that space for, learning. And again, the learning isn't just one way, because it's not just us learning from, those who would have done it before us, but then there are also fresh perspectives, fresh ideas that the younger generation do in fact share and do in fact have to contribute to the conversation. And so we have seen where, I think I would have mentioned that through our mentor-mentee contracts, the
Mm-hmm.
mentors and mentees get to decide on, what exactly it is that they want to achieve over the period of
Nice.
the program. And so this is a joint effort, it's a collaborative effort, and so it can vary from a blog post, it can be
Mm-hmm.
them coming up with some sort of advocacy campaign, doing something online. And again, these kind of activities benefit both from the more experienced mentor and then the younger
Mm.
mentee who might decide that, okay, maybe we can do an Instagram live or we can do a TikTok,
Yes,
jumping on
yes.
some existing campaign. And so the intergenerational component of it is important because we recognize that, what people have been doing it for a particular time and have established their own way of doing things. The only constant thing about life is change. And so we have to recognize as well that, bringing in fresh perspectives, bringing in new perspectives into the ongoing work is also something to be considered and can be a win-win for both parties involved.
Mm. I really appreciate the intentionality behind how you have shaped your mentorship program, truly. But
Mm-hmm.
beyond your mentorship, I also I also really love the way that your organization runs like technical trainings and
Mm-hmm.
the network building sessions. And there's one program in particular, I think it's Envisioning Resilience.
Yes.
Yes, for visual storytelling. I love that. What I want to know is how do these various approaches really come together to strengthen the participants and the collective work on climate justice?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And so Envisioning Resilience is an initiative that we were asked to pilot. So it's actually
Mm,
funded by the International Institute for Sustainable Development and the NAP Global Network. So
okay.
they had piloted these in a couple other countries. So Kenya was one of those countries. And so they had the African experience, but then they wanted to see how something like this would fare in the Caribbean. And so
Mhm.
GirlsCARE was the partner that was invited. This year we actually had the second iteration. So we've done two
Okay.
cycles. And so
Nice.
it has been, a very interesting perspective for us. So using photojournalism as a tool, not only to highlight, the
Hmm.
challenges around climate change, climate variability, but also the responses has been very important for us. And so, how the program works is that we issue a call for young women across Jamaica, different parishes, different backgrounds, different, experiences to be able to apply to be a part of this. They don't need to be professional photographers. They just
Right.
need to have an interest, in learning about photography and how it can be used as a tool to not only raise awareness about, as I said, impacts, but also resilience and building resilience within and across communities. And so, as part of this initiative, they get the opportunity to be trained by professional photographers and
Yes.
photojournalists. They get the opportunity to get the equipment, which once they meet, the minimum attendance criteria, they get to keep. And then
Wow.
at the
That
end, we have a
is
yes.
Wow, that is wonderful. I can't imagine being that young and just have to show up
With
for
a
this thing and
camera,
then get a
yes,
camera. Wow.
for sure. And then at the end, we have a policy dialogue where the photos that they would have taken over the duration of the training program are showcased, where they themselves are given the opportunity to, take the platform and have the
Mm,
policymakers, learn from and hear from them. Normally, in these kind of spaces, policymakers are the ones who are, leading, the ones who
yes.
are the ones facilitating the conversation. But we decided to flip that in these spaces. So give the trainees the opportunity to speak to what they would have learned, what they would have seen, to share those experiences, and then to have the policymakers almost, ask the different questions and be the ones in the audience for the
Mm,
this time around. And so we've seen a lot of learnings coming through the space. I remember
okay.
some of our policymakers, at least in the last one, saying that, as much as they are the ones who, do the work on a day-to-day basis, hearing some of these stories kind of, brings everything together. Hearing about the Rastafarian community and
Yes.
how, different impacts on the access to water from a river can impact their daily lives and their lived
Hmm.
realities. Hearing about persons in communities where there is no specific access to water and how during periods of drought certain things are exacerbated. Hearing about persons with certain disabilities and special needs and how the heat also compromises,
Yes.
a lot of the activities that they're able to
Hmm.
do. So again, kind of just delving into it and highlighting and
Mm,
showcasing these individual communities and how, the impacts on them are exacerbated during these periods, particularly when we think about heat, was quite eye-opening, not only for policymakers but some of the other civil society groups that
Right.
were there. And so I think in the grand scheme of things, it provides an opportunity for raising awareness through additional tools.
Mm.
Oftentimes when we think about, advocacy, yes, we think about the marches, we think about the online campaigns, we think about policy documents and all these other things, but then recognizing again the importance of artivism within the space. We
Yes.
recognize that photography, photojournalism, the arts does play a critical role. And so having these photos, having these stories being told is something that we consider important. And as well, at the end of it, our partner, Sensational, who was the one who piloted in Kenya and the other countries, they also support us with the activities on the ground. And so at the end
Mm.
of the trainings, the photos that these young women take are posted on their website, where there's
Right.
also an opportunity for these photos to be sold and for them to earn an income. So if you're a
Right.
news website, for example, and you want to be able to utilize a photo to capture something about heat and disability and a person with disabilities in Jamaica, you go onto
Mhm.
the Sensational website, you see a photo that Jhannel had taken, you're able to purchase that photo and utilize it in your story. And so,
Mm.
again, a win-win for these journalists as well as for these women photographers.
Definitely. I mean, you've given us so much information there, Janelle, but the things I think for me that stood out were, yes, very in the Caribbean, we face very specific climate challenges, number one. Number two, the work that you're doing is multi-layered. So yes,
Yeah,
you're raising awareness and teaching these girls about climate justice and how they can be advocates. Also, circular economy, right?
yeah,
And teaching them about how their art can not just raise awareness and be used as a tool for advocacy, but also as a financial,
income
a
generation.
financial, that's right, income generator for
For
them.
sure.
So that is remarkable. And just from that one program, because I know that you have your mentorship and many other programs, but just from
Yeah,
this, the lives that you're changing. I mean, it's just wonderful work that you guys do, truly.
it is. It is.
I want to come back to something that you said with regards to the very specific climate challenges that the Caribbean faces, and even
Mm-hmm.
within that, looking at the impacts, which are deeply gendered, right?
Yeah.
How does Girls Care approach these challenges in a way that ensures that our women and our girls are not left on the sidelines? And why is it so important for you?
Yeah. So GirlsCARE was founded as a feminist organization. So to begin with, so the very ethos of our work is based on feminist organizing for climate action. And so everything
Hmm.
that we do, we try to be very intentional about making sure that while we're not excluding other communities, while we're not excluding men, we
Yes.
also have to make sure that we're very targeted, that we're very deliberate in how we seek to engage women and girls within the space. When we think about the fact that women and girls are disproportionately impacted by climate impacts just by the very nature of the work that they do in the homes, the kind of care work that they have to do in addition to their regular type of work. When we think about first responders in communities, just the fact
Yes.
that women always show up because of
Yes.
their nurturing, because of the need to want to support, the need to want to help. And the idea again around the fact that there are certain periods of the month where women have to, prioritize if it
Hmm.
is that the resources that they have are going to be allocated to the home, are they going to be allocated personally. And case in point, I remember in one of our mentorship sessions, we had asked the question whether or not they thought that, women, particularly women and girls in the Caribbean, had to, make any sort of different adjustments or make any kind of special considerations when there were periods of disaster, drought, or anything. And many of them were like, oh, maybe not. But then I remember a young lady asked the question and she was like, well, whenever it is that it's that period of the month where I'm menstruating and there's a drought, I may not be able to clean up as often as I'd want. Or I may not
Exactly.
necessarily be able
Yes.
to have the resources to, do what I necessarily need to do because we have to prioritize the resources in the home to maybe purchasing water or to making sure that other things are being taken care of. And it was something that I think resonated with some of the other young ladies, because for them, they hadn't necessarily seen that as something that was specific or particular to women, even though, it
Mm.
was so blatant. And so just recognizing some of these considerations that women have to make as a single parent mother in a household as well, you have to recognize that resources have to be allocated in a particular way. And again, in the event of a disaster, in the event of a drought, these responsibilities, these thoughts even become more compounded. I
Mm-hmm.
remember as well speaking to some of our colleagues in, can't remember which of the countries it was, and she was saying that following a typhoon or any kind of event that impacts their communities, a lot of women resort to activities just to be able to, let's say, unpopular activities, to be able
Okay.
to take care of their families. So a lot
Understood.
of them take on, jobs that are not traditionally what they would want to do. But
Mm-hmm.
again, desperate times call for desperate measures. And so they are the ones who end up, going out to have to do these different odd jobs, to have to do these different things, just so that they are able to have additional resources for their families. And so again, we recognize that women have to, go the extra mile, particularly in households where they are the primary breadwinner, to make sure that the
Mm-hmm.
resources are available to take care of them. And so we've always been very cognizant of that. We recognize that some communities, women are the ones as well who go to fetch water. They're the ones who have to go to the river, to go to the spring during periods of drought. These are further away, puts them at risk for so many different things. And so, all these different stories, all these different experiences have just shown us, have just echoed that, again, women are sometimes the one who bear the brunt of some of these impacts. And so we've been very deliberate in engaging women, engaging girls. The Lend a Girl a Hand initiative
Mm-hmm.
that we're currently spearheading in response to Hurricane Melissa. Again, we've been very deliberate in ensuring that we're providing menstrual products, that we're providing
Yes.
items, food items, water, all these different things for young women, for women with disabilities, to make sure that they're able to at least feel some level of comfort amidst everything that's going on now. Providing supports as well for women to be able to rebuild, or rather reconstruct, their roofs. And again, just recognizing that a lot of them don't necessarily have the resources to even make a start. And so we're trying as
Right.
best as possible to create that space and make sure that they are able to have some level of normalcy,
Yeah. And that's a
despite
deep
everything
sigh
that's
there,
happening.
Janelle.
Yeah,
That's a
because
deep
it's
sigh.
heavy. It's a lot of heavy stuff
Exact.
when
And I
you
felt
see the
that.
homes, when you see the stories,
Yes.
when you hear the stories. So many of them have lost their jobs, and so they aren't
Mm.
able to continue school. So many of them have lost their roofs, they're living under tents. So many
Mm-hmm.
different things, so many compounded issues. And so we're just seeing how best we can provide even a bit of care
Mm-hmm.
while they seek to bounce back from some of these challenges.
Wow. Janelle, I mean, the work that you are all doing, it's so expansive. And, your deep sigh actually made me think, how are you taking care of yourself throughout all of this in the many ways that Girls Care is showing up for community, especially right now with the Lend a Girl a Hand initiative? How are you and your team showing up for yourselves?
Interestingly, I think that question is very timely because we brought together our volunteers, the Girls Care team, some of the young women that were
Mm,
impacted by the hurricane were even there, those that we would have met
right.
during our relief efforts. And so we planned a little weekend gathering that we dubbed as a visioning activity. And we found it
Mm-hmm.
timely that, at the beginning of the year, so many different things have happened. So many different things will happen, but we wanted to create space and create space for, I would say, for rest, for
Okay.
recovery, for
Good.
connection, for collaboration, for networking, all these different words of bringing persons together, but also recognizing that, it's a good time at the beginning of the year to kind of think about what it is
Mm-hmm.
that we want to achieve over the
Mm-hmm.
next few months, and also
Right.
to make sure that we have the right partners and the right people there with us. So it served as both an opportunity for us to plan
Mm-hmm.
for the year ahead, but it also, I think, provided a bit of a distraction for some of the young ladies who are
Yes,
work in these
yes,
communities to not have to think about the fact that okay, their roof is still missing, or think about the
yes.
fact that they don't have enough of what they need to function daily. And so
Hmm.
that also provided an opportunity for us to give them an escape, or volunteers, or
Yeah.
mentors, some of our mentees, or community. So we did get the opportunity to spend the weekend together, to just reflect,
Hmm.
to plan, to engage, and to engage in some mindful activities. We did a bit of yoga. There's a bit of a vision board for us to decide and what it is that we wanted to do. There were
Hmm.
opportunities for just communal space for persons to just share their experiences, share
Yes.
what it is that they have been holding close to them, and then also to build community outside of that space, because a lot of these young women probably otherwise would not have been able to, I would say, engage with the Girls Care community, because a lot
Okay.
of them, of course, they're so otherwise engaged in other things. But bringing them into the space, now we have them as members of the community. Now we have them as persons who, even if they aren't engaged in the Envision and Resilience program or the mentorship program, they're still a part of our community. They're still a part of, what we want to see for young women. And so we'll be having
Hmm.
them as points of contacts in their communities, so that when we're ready to return for whatever reason, we know that, okay, we have Chanel and we have all these other young ladies who we can touch base with, who will be able to help us to spread whatever awareness or whatever training programs or initiatives that we may want to reach in their individual communities. So, yeah, we did take time out for that collective
Okay.
care and visioning activity.
I'm happy to hear that, Janelle.
Yeah,
I am.
yeah,
That there was a
we did.
moment, right? That you
You
guys
weren't sure what was happening.
intentionally you had a moment of rest, because it is
Yes,
important that as much as you are all pouring into your
others.
community,
Hmm.
that you pour into yourselves as
Very
well. So
important.
you
We
can
can't pour from an empty
continue.
cup.
That's right. Okay.
Cannot
And
at
I
all.
like to, whenever anyone says that, I like to go just a little step further. And I think I may have mentioned it in one of our other conversations with the CLF partners. We need to fill our cups to the overflow, right? To the
True.
point where it's overflowing. Because yes, it's good. The cup is full, but the minute you pour from it,
Yeah.
it's
You start
almost
losing a
empty
bit.
again, right?
Yeah.
So let's get it to the overflow so that
True.
we're pouring from the overflow. And I think for anyone who is involved in the type of work that your organization is doing, community centered, heart centered, care centered, it is so important for us to remember the overflow as opposed to the full when it
I like
comes
that.
to,
I
right?
like that. Yes. As you already
Yes.
said, the moment you start pouring, you need to fill up again.
You need to do it again.
Yep, yep.
Exactly.
That is
Right?
so true.
So we
That is
need
so
to, and I
true.
remember I read that somewhere years ago and it just stuck with me. And at any opportunity that I can share that,
Mm-hmm.
especially as I said, for those that are community, heart, and care centered, think overflow and not full. Right?
Nice. Nice. It's a
Yes.
good one.
Thank you. And thank you to whomever I I I took that from because I read it years ago and it just stuck. But Janelle, as we wrap up this conversation, I I want to know, as you continue to build partnerships and grow your work, of course, including organizations like the Clara Lionel Foundation, what does success look like for Girls Care over the next 5 years? Girls Care Jamaica. How how do you hope the organization will continue shaping the next generation of feminist climate leaders?
So, looking ahead and thinking about, what we need to protect and what we need to nurture, I think that reflecting on the past 5 years of work, because last year we celebrated our fifth year. And so
Hmm.
for the next 5 years, I think what is most important is that we protect our culture of care and mentorship. Um, I think when we think about growth, it can easily pull organizations towards this idea of urgency and burnout. And I'm really happy that you asked about how we are protecting and caring for ourselves,
Mm.
because, so many different issues, so many different challenges. And oftentimes we might want to, support, and we might want to fill this gap and fill that gap. And so the idea
Yes.
of the urgency and burnout can easily happen, particularly as we seek to grow and as we seek to get into other communities. But I think
Definitely.
we have been very intentional about slowing down to nurture leadership, reflection, and healing. And so I think for the next 5 years, I hope that Girls Care will continue to be a space where women, girls, mature and less mature, feel supported, not just when we think about disaster, not just in the mentorship program or throughout the cycle of the mentorship program or the individualing
Mhm.
resilience program, but overall in the journey of leadership, particularly around climate change and climate justice. See us as a space for joy and for care. We consider ourselves a
Yes.
community of care for the climate. And so we want persons, whether you are a current trainee, whether you're a part of the alumni, whether you're a mentor, a mentee, a volunteer, an advisory committee member, whatever position you hold, to see us as a space for care, for joy, leadership, and transformation. I think um, it's going to be important that we create space for this through sustainable movements, through ensuring that we continue to show up for our communities and create space for them to show up for others. And so I think for the next 5 years, it's about leadership,
Mhm.
reflection, healing, care, joy, and transformation, and finding different tools, different initiatives, different ways to be able to bring those forward and carry as well the persons with us who have been there, who have been showing up, who have been volunteering, who have been very committed to the cause to ensure that we bring them along with us so that even if Aisha and I at some point transition out of being the face of Girls Care,
Yes.
we will definitely have persons who are ready to take on the mantle, who are ready to show up and to continue the work and the vision and the mandate. And so I think
Mm.
thinking about the next 5 years, continuity, sustainability, leadership, and everything that comes with that.
That is incredible. You are incredible, Jhannel. Aisha is incredible. All of you for Girls Care JA, thank you for the work that you're doing. And Jhannel, thank you so much for sharing your experiences and the incredible work that is happening through Girls Care JA. Truly, for me, it's really clear that, it's Girls Care JA it's more than programs or initiatives. You are creating spaces where young women in the Caribbean are empowered. So it's, even though your work is centered in Jamaica, just think of all the young women that are watching on, and
Yeah,
are being empowered to lead in climate justice with care, courage, and, like you said, resilience.
yeah.
So thank you so much. And thank you for taking the time out, because I know how busy you guys are and we really appreciate it.
And thank you so much for having us. Thanks to CLF for deciding to do this with Island Girls Rock. I know that, again, both of your entities are also quite busy, but I think giving grantees the opportunity to speak to their work and to talk about not only the past but the future, I think is also
Mm.
important in helping us to also think a little bit more clearly about what we want to do and how we want to do that. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Jhannel. You've been listening to Rooted, Stories of Community Driven Change, a limited edition podcast series from Island Girls Rock and the Clara Lionel Foundation. You can find us wherever you get your podcast fix.